Welcome back, and we will talk about the resources. On Wednesday, when David Neal talked about stewardship, you saw how your tithe goes through the church organization and contributes to different things. So let me talk to you about the Adventist Mission Department and the resources. The first one that the GC administers is the center of influence. So if you are in an important part of the country where you have the potential to reach many people, as long as you reach out to a new group, talk to the union, and the General Conference is willing to start a center of influence there, the money cannot go into the buildings, but the maximum budget is $250,000. The GC will pay up to 60% of your budget, and the important thing is that you need to have a plan, a budget for 5 years, but you need to be self-sustainable after 3 years. The second option, how the TED can help you, and we administer this on GC behalf, is the GC Session Youth Offering. So as long as you have a project which is done by youth and for youth, there is $5,272 for each union each year. And this is for you as pastors, so that if you have projects that are by youth and for youth, talk to your union, there is money available. The third one that is related to the GC is the Church Planting Global Mission Projects. If you are starting or revitalizing, somebody mentioned that not much was said about revitalizing dying churches. If you have something here, you can talk to Anka Tanasa at TED. It's a database where you enter your church plans. And remember, GC operates strict policy, no reporting, no funding. So if you want your funds for 2018, you need to submit your reports for 2017. And the last one used to be called, no, I still need the previous slide. The last one used to be called Council on Evangelism and Witness. Now it's called GC Mission Advance. It's one project for all TED, so the unions need to submit a project to us, and it's in the amount of $25,000. For 2018, we already have one, so from 2019, this is for the unions. Next slide, please. Now let's go to the TED projects. Every year we put aside $40,000 for creative and innovative outreach. If you have a crazy idea which is new, innovative, submit a project. Every time in January we award to different projects $40,000. Please don't send them in September, or we put them into the next year, because by then all the money are distributed. Last November, we started special initiatives, so £23,000, 454 is available for the area of ADRA and social sphere, for youth-led initiatives and cutting-edge departmental resources that reach secular and postmodern Europe. And the last but not least, in the area of different departments, if you have a project that you feel should be funded by the division, we are willing to fund activities. We are not able to put money into buildings, but if you have activities, we are willing to help you with that. More information you find on the website under TD Adventist Mission Resources. Thank you for your attention.
Looking for something positive to share with your neighbours, friends and family? Something that shares our faith and values, but in language relevant to the European mindset?
I'm expecting to spend time in nature, following in the footsteps of a very determined and inspiring young lady.
I expect to learn a bit of Welsh.
I look forward to nature.
The Trans-European Division produces occasional series of videos that can touch and influence lives. From the highly successful and widely distributed Reformation Journey series to thought-provoking comment from as far afield as Iceland or Israel.
If you come to Reykjavik, you have to get out and enjoy the sunshine when the sunshine is there.
I met an Armenian Christian here, and he told me, you go into the city here, it's the center of the earth, because, well, You've got Golgotha there, you've got the tomb there, and God is looking down from heaven.
To special projects such as World Refugee Sabbath,
So if I ask anyone, is there a possibility to find a home on this earth? Well, if you watch the news, I think the answer will be, it's not possible on this earth.
or stories of inspiration from around the TED.
5 years old.
These are all available for you online or to download, translate, and adapt for your own language and culture. Help expand your mission by using these powerful resources.
You know, I just love walking in the countryside, enjoying nature, the beauty around me. It's stunning. And sometimes I look at it in great detail, but other times I just want the whole big picture. And sometimes it's exactly the same with my church. It's a great place to worship, but sometimes I just need the bigger picture, and that's what I love about the TED website and TED News, the email newsletter. Stories of mission and action, giving a vision from Southern Europe up through the Balkans and Central Europe to projects and initiatives in the North and in Scandinavia. Okay, so I'm the editor, but that doesn't stop me feeling inspired when I get a picture of what's happening in your church, in your community, and I think, wow, maybe I could do that in mine. It's all about sharing. That's what TED News is all about. Visit the website and sign up now so that together we can connect, engage, and inspire.
GAIN, the Global Adventist Internet Network, is the major annual training and networking initiative for Adventists involved in communication and media across Europe. Meeting first at Newbold College in 2017 and then near the Hope Channel Hispania studios in Spain in 2018, GAIN Europe aims to help develop higher levels of communication skills, to share resources, to inspire, and to develop joint projects working collaboratively across Europe. This Is My Mission, a series of short video clips for social media, came as a result of the 2017 conference, with 23 contributions from 9 countries. These are available for all studios to use and all members to share. This year, GAIN participants are working on a more ambitious print, video and social media project focused on fathers and fatherhood, a much-needed initiative in modern-day Europe. For 2019, GAIN Europe will join together with the Global GAIN Conference and ADRA, meeting beside the Dead Sea in Jordan. If you're a communicator, plan to be there. Smaller training events also happen at your invitation throughout the year, covering subjects from crisis management to video and photography skills to practical tips on sharing Jesus online. For more details and suggestions, visit the communication page of the TED website.
Good morning, everybody. My name is John Baildam, and it's my privilege and honor to be the principal of possibly the Trans-European Division's greatest resource, Newbold College of Higher Education. As I look around, there are countless people here who have been to Newbold, graduated from Newbold. Many of you have been through what is now known as our English Language Center. Many of you have graduated from our theology programs. Some of you have graduated from our business studies degree. Some of you have studied humanities. Some of you have just been there for a semester or a year as a university year experience. And as we look at those leading out in workshops, the speakers for plenary sessions, there are so many former Newboldians and current Newboldians. Until this morning, and thank you for the Serbian group who led out in the music, but for the previous couple of days, the music has been largely led by current Newboldians. Kert, the head of our English Language Center from Estonia, Tihi Lazic, systematic theologian from Serbia, one of our students in humanities from the Netherlands, Naomi, and Robert, one of our business students from Hungary. And well supported, dare I say, by what predominantly has been the Newbold Contemporary Service Band. It's been an extremely busy summer. I could spend the next hour talking to you about what we've done this summer. We've launched our Doctor of Ministry degree. We had the third year of our MA Leadership program. And many of you who feel you've missed out, we are working currently on a joint venture between the Trans-European Division and the Inter-European Division for a new MA Leadership cohort starting next year. We've just finished a week with Pastor and Mrs. Mark Finley, a church growth or evangelism and church growth symposium. There was so much interest that I sat down the other day with Mark, and we've agreed that next year there will be 2 groups. So watch out next August. Those of you who missed it this year, there will be further provision. And next week, the new academic year starts, and we have our year in mission and service. Many people want to do a degree in underwater basket weaving or left-handed knitting, which we don't offer at the college. But I would love all of our young people to spend at least one semester, if not at least a year, in an Adventist educational institution. And of course, I would prefer them to come to Newbold. Statistics show us that possibly 70% of our young people will leave the church. That's 7 out of every 10. Only 3 will stay. I put it to you that if our young people come and experience Christian education, we cannot guarantee that they will stay with the Lord, but they stand a much better chance. And so we have developed this year in mission and service in tandem with the British Union Conference, with ADRA, and with Adventist Frontier Missions, whereby students come to us for 1 semester of academic underpinning, and then they go off on a mission project. So encourage your young people in your churches to come and take the year in mission and service. Do make sure you go by our booth out in the foyer. If you haven't got a copy of our quality magazine, The Newboldian, then please pick one of these up. They are totally free of charge, at least for the duration of this convention. Thank you for supporting Newbold College, and my colleagues and I will be very happy to chat with you as the hours unfold. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Welcome to another EPC Talks. Now, we have some good news and some bad news.
So, the good news. We have 3 more fantastic speakers today. Anna, what's the bad news?
Well, the bad news is that this is the final session of EPC Talks for this year.
Oh. Have you all enjoyed yourself? You sure?
Maybe.
Well, I've enjoyed myself.
Yes, thank you. Some people have really enjoyed themselves. Throughout this week, we've been challenged to connect.
I almost forgot there.
We've been inspired. And while that is all well and good, unless we implement what we've been talking about when we go back home, then there really wasn't much point in coming here.
That's why today's focus is an emphasis on change. Right. We hope today will move you towards the steps that will bring vitality to each of your ministries.
Once again, we want to thank you for your participation throughout the sessions. Please remember that if you ask a question today, to keep it brief so that we can make the most of our question and answer time. You know, your engagement is really what has made this session worth it, so thank you again.
So, are you ready to change?
Sam, tell us who our next speaker is.
Well, he comes with 37 years of marriage, 4 adult daughters, has a wealth of pastoral experience, 17 years, in fact, in Scandinavia. He served as a president for the Swedish and Danish unions, totaling 11 years, and is now serving as the head of theological studies at Newbold College. Today, he dares us to embrace the painful necessity of change. Please welcome Bjørn Ottesen.
Oops. Well, good morning. I hope you, in your heart, is ready for some change. Change is very hard. I'll start with a little story. Last year, I turned 60. No, that's great. It's not And coming out of a restaurant in Copenhagen, having celebrated with my family, I just heard this roar behind me. And as I turned my head, I saw a car coming up. And it was a Lamborghini roaring its engines. And I thought, wow, you know, it's making so much noise here in central Copenhagen between these high houses. And I thought, but the cars just stopped next to us. And out came a man with a helmet on. And I thought, huh? Can this have something to do with my birthday today? And it did. And behind the helmet, I saw the familiar face of a person I used to be a pastor for when he was a teenager, now in his middle 30s. And when we talked, he said, reflecting back on all the fun we had in church in Pathfinders and the regular Friday nights we had for teens, go swimming and having Bible studies and playing games and eating and more Bible studies, I said, it's payback time. So he took me for a ride. And those of you who know something about cars will know this is quite extraordinary. That particular car, there only have very few samples in the whole world. And I don't dare to mention the price. And he even let me drive it. So, having tested out some of these incredible features of this car, I'm not going to tell you where, then we kind of slowly drove and talking and driving towards the place I was staying. And our conversation was serious, and it was fun, and he was joking, and he was remembering good old days, and he was talking serious. And I couldn't help but say, because I knew that he was not a regular attender of church anymore. Maybe that's an understatement. So I said, I don't need to mention his name, but I said, friend, why are you not with us anymore? And the answer really challenged me. He said, I'm in. And it didn't fit into my categories at all. We continued to talk, and we were actually together for a couple of hours. But looking back on that conversation, it has challenged my conception of who's what. And where do people stand, and how do we categorize people? And this morning I'd like to say something about the group of people we call millennials. That's the group of people who have been born between 1980 and 2000. And those of you who have been to my workshop, particularly on Wednesday, you have to excuse me now, because you're going to have a little bit of repetition. But I'd like to mention a little introduction to some of the things that are true about these people. And you might say, hey man, you just told me you're 60 years old. What do you know about millennials? Well, I appreciate your question, actually. But I have 4 millennial daughters. So to my defense, I also teach millennials almost every day. And then I was happy to have a study leave this spring semester, and I focused my entire study on millennials. Maybe I have something to say. The millennials in this room can judge me. So let's have a go at that. Before I enter that, I'd just like to say a couple of words about being prophetic. Because we had the gift of prophecy among us in the younger days of our movement. And we have been proud to call ourselves a prophetic movement, saying something to the world. And the very nature of prophecy is to be able to take the eternal principles of the kingdom of God and apply them to a local time and a local culture. And I believe that, first of all, our pioneers were given a message to the 19th century North American situation. That does not mean that I'm saying that it's not relevant anymore. But I am saying that this is a challenge to us. Because it's a challenge to us that we have voices in our congregations and in our midst who are saying, that which the pioneers said and did, this is what we have to say and do all the way to the coming of Jesus Christ. And by saying that, they are somewhat denying the very nature of being prophetic. Because being prophetic is to speak to a certain culture and a certain time. And saying this, they are kind of denying or maybe closing their eyes to the fact that through the last 100 years, so much has happened to our world and in the way we think about things. And guys, it's painful for us as leaders to bring the church into new realities. The gospel will always change a culture and challenge a culture, but it will also integrate itself with the culture. Okay, going back, I'm sorry, I forgot to click these. I meant to show you a couple of pictures of millennials too, or at least some. So can we be a prophetic movement to these people? I'd like to mention 3 challenges and 3 opportunities, very briefly. I have about 10 minutes left, maybe less. But I hope this will just stir you to think and maybe create curiosity so that you will study. We need to know the people we are talking to. The first issue I'm going to talk about is the millennials' relationship to knowledge. In the second half of the 20th century, postmodernism taught us to question established truth systems, and individual interpretations and relativism became the approach. And even if this relativism seems to come to an end, because postmodernism is not present anymore, it's past, people are now looking for answers and meaning to a larger degree, But the pendulum that swung from the modern approach, or that the Adventism was formed inside, to the postmodern times, that pendulum is not swinging all the way back to the optimistic view we had of how we can understand and explain everything. But millennials, they want to find truth and are looking for meaning and answers. But intuitively they know that all human claims that to know truth is subject to human limitations. So when the information around, just let me use some very banal illustration. Yesterday, science told us that you need to use sunscreen lotions to protect you against the sun rays so that you don't get skin cancer. Today, some voices are saying the sunscreen products are causing more cancer than the sun. Yesterday, no, it's not literal. Yesterday, we were told that the cholesterol in eggs was very bad for us. Today, some say it's not so bad. Knowledge is changeable, and what we think might not be right. This humbleness and relative relationship to knowledge clashes with the sometimes strong claims of religious organizations claiming to have the truth. And to millennials, the individual or the organization that speak too loudly and too confidently about their position are either arrogant or stupid. Millennials will tend to hold a position, but at the same time know that there are other ways of seeing things. And some cultural critics describe this generation as the perhaps, I'm sorry, I was there already, the perhaps generation, because they are so aware that what is true today might not be so tomorrow. And this is worth thinking about when in churches we talk about faith and doubt. Some level of doubt will always be there when people are reflecting and asking questions. If the church ignores difficult questions that are posed by science and philosophy, it will come across as dishonest and ignorant. Every opinion must be presented in humility, a new relationship to knowledge. Secondly, pluralism is normal. That means a variety of people with different opinions is normal. Young people have grown up with multiple world views, religions, lifestyles, and opinions. The educational system, TV programs, and of course the internet, most of all, has taught us that many different ways to live your life live side by side. So, millennials do not see the importance of agreeing and being of the same kind and mind. Community is not built on like-mindedness or having the same opinion, but rather on authentic relationships. I believe you can see how this can clash with a traditional church parameter. And to become member of a church like the Seventh-day Adventist Church, you need to accept the beliefs, values, behaviors, and lifestyles of that organization. Conformity is made or makes you acceptable as a member. This is very different from millennial thinking. They find the homogeneous group, that means the group where everybody are the same, to be an artificial thing. And to demand total submission to a system of thought can be seen as some form of oppression or use or misuse of power. And in parentheses, the postmodern philosophers, the French philosophers like Lyotard, I don't know if you know these names, but it doesn't matter, but he says the big isms of the modern era are ways to control people and have power over people. And this kind of lingers with people even today. It is not okay, says the millennial, to submit to the ideas and beliefs of others, nor is it healthy to be streamlined into accepting the conclusion that others have eaten, chewed, and digested on your behalf. You must develop your own standpoint. Monoculture is artificial. And this leads us to the third thing I'd like to mention out of a whole variety of things we could talk about, individualism. Millennials find and have their identity in themselves and not in the group they belong to. On this point, they are very different from their parents, or maybe even rather grandparents and grandparents, who were the people who became Adventists when the church grew fast in the first half of the past century, in Europe at least, that is. Millennials have grown up with voices telling them to listen to their heart, be themselves, react to their gut feeling, and believe in their own intuition. A Swedish researcher calls this generation or this phenomenon the sacralization of self, if you understand that term, the sacralization of self. And a Danish sociologist argues that for young people today, the most important quest is to find themselves. Millennials are not looking for an organization or a group to give them identity, but they rather bring their own identity into the fellowship of the group. They are not Adventists with a capital A. They are individuals who choose to be part of the Adventist community. And I think you can hear the difference. So, the strong individualism, however, does not mean that millennials are self-centered or egoistic. The opposite is often true. Many young people today have high values, strong social engagement, want to protect the environment, and are willing to make sacrifices for the common good. But they are part of the fellowship on their own terms. In their eyes, we are all individuals on our own journeys, as we sing in the song we have sung several times here, we are on a journey. And we are not together because we share all opinions, but rather because the genuine meeting of authentic people is stimulating and interesting. You are a journey, I am on a journey. The church is not a destination, but it is a place where individuals meet to reflect and enhance each other's on each person's journey. I seem to forget to click this one. All right, that's a summary. Right, so what have I said so far? Bringing these three things together. We are individuals on parallel journeys. This is a millennial statement. We are not here because we all agree. We respect each person's present place and position on their journey. We are here because we enjoy meeting people who are honest and open about their faith and doubts. We are here because we are seeking answers to the same questions. We are here because of a common cause, and I'll come back to that when I talk about the three opportunities. I'm already out of time, but this will be very quick. Please. The millennial wants relationship. An issue with young people today is that the internet is giving the superficial version of what it means to have a relationship. They want to meet real people in real world, and they want to meet people older than themselves. This is something you can read in any book on millennials. So to come into a place where there is openness and genuine meeting of people, that's interesting. A question that comes to us is, how do we define who belong? You might have to think about that in your church. The second opportunity is that millennials are looking for a cause. Many are idealists and want to be part of it to change the world. Millennials tend to choose careers and free time activities that have meaning and makes an impact for good in the world. Millennials tend to do more volunteer work than previous generations. Practical Christianity is more important than the right answers. So they are not saying, is it true, which Adventists tend to answer in the past, but they will say, does it make a difference? And does it work? Last opportunity I mentioned, millennials are interested in spiritual matters. And again, researchers show that they are more open to conversations about faith than their parents. Their spirituality, however, is often different, of a different kind. It is not about being right and explaining everything rationally. It's about values, social engagement, altruistic ideas, social justice, relationships, and the transcendent. All of these things are strong in Adventism, and it's ironic that we find it so hard to connect to these people. Conclusions. Millennials want to own their own life. They are individualists, but they want community, where they are respected for who they are and where they are on their journey and quest. Millennials appreciate the honest, the transparent, the authentic. They want answers, but tend to stay in the perhaps, admitting that they might be wrong. If the church puts on its membership a straitjacket, expecting conformity in belief and behavior, it will push millennials away. A genuine quest for truth and meaning, where questions and doubts are welcomed as part of the journey, is needed for millennials to interact. Can we be prophetic again? Can we connect to a new generation about the good news about God and the kingdom of His Son, Jesus Christ? Amen.
Thank you, Bjørn, for that challenge and those questions. I felt like you gave me a voice, but I'm sure you have lots to talk about. You have just a couple of minutes just to turn to the person next to you and talk about what you agreed with. Talk about what you agreed with. Just a couple of minutes. Off you go.
Going to cut your discussions short, just to make sure that we have time for your questions to Bjørn. So if you have a question, let's start with, okay, we've got someone very eager here. If you could please stand and I will throw the mic to you. Remember to please keep your questions brief because we're short on time.
Okay, good morning. My question goes to the answer to the last question you made. How do we connect to this group of people? Now, myself, I'm a young pastor, yet I'm not a millennial. I'm a previous generation. So I was born and working other mind mentality. And what I want to ask is related to that, meaning that is the answer to connect, to engage, to finally reach this generation, new generation called millennials. A program, is a church that needs to change, is the pastor's mentality who needs to change. Because we always talk about adapting, but what is this adapting that we're talking about that will reach finally this group?
Okay. Your answer demands more than a minute. Your question, as you said, demands more than a minute of an answer. Yes, pastors can think differently. The whole church needs to approach each other differently. This is extremely difficult to implement when we for generations have taught people to be very categorical about who's in and who's out, and what you have to do and what you should not do, and what the identity as an Adventist is. How do you change that thought culture? And I think there is a need for also planting new fellowships, house groups, church plants, where actually a new mentality can be established. Personally, I have, from my experience as a leader and looking around Europe and where I am now, I see very few changes happening in a church that's been around for a long time. I'm sorry if I'm pessimistic about that, but I am, because I've seen it. Just to move a piano from this side of the room to the other is a very difficult operation, and it sometimes takes years. So to change the mentality and the thinking of people is a huge process. And I think maybe we need some new meeting points also, where we have a different way to talk about our religion and our faith.
Thank you so much, Bjørn, for sharing your expertise. Unfortunately, we don't have more time for more questions, but as always, Bjørn is more than happy to meet with you after this session to continue the conversation. Please give Bjørn a warm thank you.
So it's that time where we're going to just get up. So I hand over everything over to Alistair.
Let's go, guys. Don't go, guys. You need to stay with me. EPC!
EPC.
Anna and Sam are going to join me. So Anna and Sam are going to do this. Okay, we need to make a little gap.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going like this. Anna, that's right, good. Well done, Sam. Well done, Anna. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Very good. 1, 2, 3. Very good. Okay, now we're going to just move our waist and our stand up. 1, 2, 3. Very good. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Sam, I'm impressed. Okay. 1, 2, 3. EPC. Okay, what I want you to do now is bring your left arm this way. Bring your right arm this way. Go like that and just stretch it.
Oh, it hurts.
Connect. Inspire. Change. Okay, other side. Your right arm this way. Left arm. Connect. Inspire. Change. Very good. See you in 60 seconds. Thank you.
Okay, Anna. Who's our next speaker?
Sorry, I need to get my notes. She is a wife, a musician, a nurse and midwife, speaker, mentor, author, and the list really goes on. She is passionate about empowering women and is an expert on holistic well-being and community outreach. In fact, she has developed a range of resources and programs in these areas, 3 of which have been embraced by the General Conference and are being used globally. Today, she will guide us as we learn to navigate changes in life. Please give a warm welcome to Sharon Platt McDonald.
Thank you. It's a long walk. Thank you, Anna and Sam, for your introduction. Good morning, everyone. It is a privilege to share with you today in this Change Talk as we examine 3 essentials for the change journey. Firstly, how we use evaluations to think through the process before the transition. Secondly, how we use milestones to progress the journey during the transition. And thirdly, the learning and growth that emerges after the transition, even when change is negative. Are you ready for the journey? Then let's begin. When a national body approaches the Seventh-day Adventist Church, asking for their help in addressing national problems and finding solution to those challenges, it's an indication that Adventists are being seen as change agents. Let me explain. One afternoon at work, I received a phone call from the executive of the National Cancer Association Trust, or the NCAT as they called it, National Cancer Action Team, rather. And they were requesting that I join them in partnership working in helping to raise the low levels of compliance with essential medical interventions in cancer patients, particularly those who came from a faith background and certain cultural groups. Now, they were anxious simply because there was a higher rate of mortality amongst individuals of faith in certain cultural groups. And then they highlighted that they knew about the work of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in health. Can we say amen to that? They also began to list programs that I had been involved with. I had previously worked with the Department of Health and engaged the Balham Seventh-day Adventist Church in one of their projects. And that was to do with blood donation and the low uptakes of those from minority ethnic groups. They highlighted the fact also that they have read about Seventh-day Adventists and their longevity, and they were keenly following our health interventions in the UK. Did you know that? So they then said, we would like to, and I'll quote, when they looked at what they had been doing with cancer patients and why the uptake was so low in these religious groups and cultural groups, they said, what we have been doing is not working. We feel that your church, can help us change that. No pressure. How do you change people's religious beliefs and cultural practices? You don't. You give them options so they can make an informed choice. And so as I thought about the task that lay ahead, I breathe a prayer that God will go ahead of me, which is what I always do when there is a challenge or something major to address. But I also realize that the fight is not in trying to change a person's standpoint, but in giving them options. And I remember this quote from Socrates. The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. And with that comes the tension when people realize or when they feel that you're trying to move them from their old way of thinking to a new way. So how do we manage this transition? As I sat with the cancer team and engaged in this project, I had put together what I call the P's of progression, and I'd used this model that I devised in various change initiatives that I had done throughout the years. And as we sat down, I looked at and worked through with the project team these steps. Firstly, in looking at how to think through the changes that you're going to face, the P's of progression, the first thing is to look at your place, your starting point. Where are you now? And that helps to sort of map the way ahead. If you know where your starting point is, you know how far you need to go. So with this cancer project, the starting point, the place we started with, was that there was between 20 to 30% of uptake or compliancy with essential medical intervention for cancer. The next thing is to look at your potential. Your potential is, where do I want to get to? What will the end point look like? When I look ahead, what do I see? What will be achieved? And so we looked at the starting point, which was 20 to 30% compliance rate, and where we wanted to get to was between 60 to 70% compliance rate. That's a large gap. The tension that exists was how are we going to get from 20% to 70%? And then we looked at the aspect of the purpose. When you're going to make a change, it's important to be conversant with why the change is taking place. And so I undertook a number of road shows trying to engage with significant individuals and cancer patients from these ethnic minority groups and faith groups, and to explain why we needed to change the way we looked at how we engaged them in the treatment process. The pace is also important. When you're going to initiate a change, how fast do I go? What's the timetable? And that helped to enable us to move within a framework. Now, often when we're implementing a change, you'll get those people who are like the hare. They run off to the finishing line and think, well, why am I here? What am I doing? And then you'll get those who are like the tortoise, who's just looking at the sunrise and just really taking their time along. And you have to treat them like wheelbarrows. You have to push them. And so the pace is important. And we had 18 months to get this transition from this low rate of compliance to a higher rate. And then People are essential to take the journey forward. Who do you align yourself with when you're initiating a change? We need to align ourselves with individuals who are committed to the change process, because people can either enhance or stagnate your change process. Have you met those individuals? Probably on the church board, maybe, who can stall the progress. So align yourself with individuals who are interested. We then had to align ourselves with the imams, for instance, for the Muslim groups, and the faith leaders in the community. And then pause to consider the cost, the risk, the potential impact of the change. Now, several years later, when I took this model with me to the British Union Conference when I was working as the Director for Women Ministries, and we wanted to engage Muslim women in the community, I looked at the people aspect and then met with the imams again. And it was useful that I had used this model in my work with the Department of Health. And I was able to say to them, look, we're not here to convert your Muslim women, because I think it's very important to respect the cultural differences. And we weren't going to go in to the Muslim community and say to the Muslim women, come to our church and come to our retreat. We had to go to the imams to explain what we were doing and so forth. And because I'd worked with the Department of Health on this cancer project previously, I was able to show that we had engaged their community and there was a successful outcome. And also the pause to look at the risk. The risk with engaging with a Muslim community and trying to get their women on board without first passing the imams and so forth can be a risk to their relationships and even their lives. So that proved useful to be able to remember those points. And so here I was progressing with this change with a piece of progression, helping the team to think through the transition before they entered it. And of course, when you have an idea and a change, it's very easy for us to rush ahead when we're asked to implement a change, rush to the finishing line because we want to see that change progressed. Or sometimes people have asked you to implement a change, and before thinking it through, you're heading off and trying to get things done. The pause is so important to think through as these progressions, these P's enable. But the spiritual focus was also very important. In my life, I've used, with all the various changes, be it professional changes or personal changes, I've used these two scriptures as a benchmark. Isaiah 43 verse 19 reminds me that God is the author of change and that he can bring about the new even in a hostile environment. And Proverbs 3, 5-6 is also another scripture that has kept me grounded so I don't rush into implementing change without first asking for God's guidance. And so as we move into the next stage, remembering that large changes or great changes needs to be implemented in small steps. And so I devised a goals format using the word goals as an acronym. This is the second essential to look at how we guide the process during the transitional change. And using this GOLD as an acronym, I looked at G, go for it, O, obstacles and opportunities, A, attitude, L, links, and S, standards. Now, I used this format previously to coach student nurses and health visitors in their practice as they were going through their training. And in April 2006, I was invited by the editor of the Nursing Standard to use for them to use this format and publish it in their national journals to help coach nurses through their training and for career changes. Several years later, I received a phone call from a lady in Canada who had implemented the GOLD format that I created here into her personal life, but also used it for organizational change with positive effect. And so by the time I had engaged in this cancer research, this was a format that was well used. And so G stands for go for it. What is your goal? What is your dream? Whatever it is, know that God can direct you and ask for his blessing because he knows best. He knows what your aims are and your desires are. And so we plotted the journey. The go for it, knowing what the goal is, it's important to begin at the end and then work backwards, simply because you know where you want to get to, and then you devise the steps to get there. So we did a plotting the journey or mapping the journey. Mapping the journey enables you to see where the goal is, but look at the steps so you get the trajectory right, you know where you're heading. Again, this aspect of mapping the journey was important for me when I used this. Later on, I was invited to do some work with refugees and look at their health needs in the community. Because I mapped the journey of what we wanted to achieve, when I met with the Department of Health, they were able to see clearly where the headings were, what the journey involved, the stations on the journey, and be able to replicate it, use this to be replicated in other areas. Mapping your journey is important because when you're no longer in charge of that project or someone else takes over, they will know the steps to follow. The next aspect is the opportunity. Ask yourself, what opportunities around me will make a difference to the outcome of my goal? What are the things that will enable me to progress this goal well? When I was working as a health visitor, we had a report that came out indicating that the MMR vaccine had some link with autism. All the mothers stopped, a number of the mothers, rather, in Lambeth stopped immunizing, and there was a concern that there would be an epidemic. I was asked to lead a project to, the government actually decided that they wanted to do a national campaign to look at raising adverts to encourage mothers to continue immunizations. The project I was leading, we devised posters. And I reluctantly submitted one of mine because I was just leading the project, so I didn't want to be involved in producing the posters. But the group I was working with, come on, we know you like words, just put a few things on the paper and see what happens. And you can imagine my surprise when the posters that I had created was actually used in the national campaign. And when they did an evaluation later to ascertain the efficacy of the adverts, those very posters were some of the ones that enabled mothers to change their views about immunization. So opportunities brings changes. What about the obstacles? When you're initiating a change, there are many obstacles in the way. It could be finance, it could be resources, it could be people. There are so many things there. Ask yourself, which are the obstacles that are most going to stall? Now, when you look at that list, I'm going to hone in on the people barriers. Very often when faced with change, and we often complain that people are not with us on the journey and that they are the barriers. But sometimes it could be that people are not, or they're not trained or qualified enough. So when you're going to engage with people, then in order for them to fulfill the process, ensure that you have given them the training to enable them to get to implement the changes that you're requesting. You know, you can change systems and processes, but if you ignore people, all you will get is an aesthetic difference, but not a deep down rooted change that people can believe in, and later on there's a fallout when they rebel. And so bringing people with us is important so they don't become barriers. But in the book, Antagonists, there's a book by Kenneth Hogg called Antagonist in the Church. And he looks at how you deal with difficult people who stall your progress. And he looks at when you get all of those emails and those letters, he gives a 2-line response of how you respond to critical letters. Now, I once received a letter 10 pages long, and it took me 2 days to formulate the response. Had I read this book way back then, I wouldn't have taken 2 days. I would have just given them the 2 lines, and that would have done it. And so how to deal with those who are obstructing the journey is important. The next one is your attitude. Attitude is everything. When you look at, we need to ensure that our attitudes are not becoming a barrier. And so think of all the difficulties that you're looking at on the change journey, and think of it. A positive attitude can make the best of opportunities as they come, and a positive attitude can also help you to navigate the obstacles. And it's this quote from Maya Angelou that I love. If you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. And then the last in the goal series, or second to last, the links. Who are you linked to? You know, it's important to link with people. Linking or connecting with individuals is key to the journey. Who are you linked with in your change process? Now, bringing people with you on the journey is important. I underline or underscore the word with you, because not all those who travel with us are for us. Not all those who travel alongside you are with you. Remember Sanballat and Tobiah in the building of the temple walls, rather, the rebuilding the walls? Nehemiah, the project manager, instead of trading insults when they ridiculed him, he aligned himself to encourage individuals who would get him on the journey. So we don't need to engage in battles with individuals. We just need to align ourselves and encourage those who can progress the change. And then the last one is standards. Standards help you to mark the path you're going. They're important for success. Standards help you to maintain the quality and look at when you're hitting your target and when you're falling short. When I was training on the health expos, we realized that the health expos were being used across the BUC, and there were different standards. Some health expos were excellent and others were less so. And so we devised the standard format of which everyone needed to follow those processes in order for continuity. And so that's the goals in terms of progressing the change. And then the final one is when life changes, how do you learn and grow from negative life changes? When life changes to be harder, change yourself to be stronger. I've just gone through a period of change, having buried both my parents within 7 months, and asking God to join you on that journey when change. What do you do when change happens, a change that you did not invest in or you didn't orchestrate? How do you cope with that? How do you learn? Now, these 2 books have been the most prominent books that has assisted me when change was negative or change happened unexpectedly. The Hope Quotient from Ray Johnson explains how to measure change and raise your hope levels even in difficult circumstances. And Super Survivors looks at when something happens in your life personally and the change is negative, they don't bounce back. These are super survivors who bounce forward, becoming better versions of themselves. And so what happens with post-change growth? My largest post-change growth was when, in 2011, I sustained a head injury, which affected my speech. I was unable to speak for at least 2 or 3 weeks, which was a very interesting experience for my husband. I had to have speech therapy. And during that time, I had to cancel all my speaking engagements and then focus on my writing. In that time, I developed some of the most reflective writing I've ever done. And in fact, God enabled me because I could feel myself getting lower and lower, not being able to accomplish what I needed to do. And I asked him to help me to engage in something else. And I did some writing and formulated a devotional book which went out to a number of our ladies, and they were able to contribute to when things happen in your life, how do you move forward with God? That book has now found its way into prisons and detention centers and hospitals. And we've received a number of letters from across the world for women's life who's been impacted by that book. A negative change that happened to me produced positive changes in others. And the learning that even happened just in our marriage, I can see the headlines for a new book, When Wives Are Silent. That's another subject. And so post-learning growth, you can learn from difficult life circumstances. Change is a necessary part of life. Be willing to surrender what you are for what you could become. What have you learned through the changes that you've encountered, be they positive or negative? You can change, you can grow. You can ask God to lead you and direct you and show you what you can take away from all your life changes. Be exemplary. Be change.
Sharon, thank you so much for sharing those very valuable and practical tools that we can use when navigating change. Now, it's your turn to participate, and we'd like to remind you that the more you participate in the session, the more you will get out of it. So we really encourage all of you to take part in the next group discussion. The question we would like you to discuss is, what did you find most useful in the talk that was just shared? We'll give you a couple of minutes to discuss that together.
Okay. Sorry to bring your conversation to a close. We want to try and hear from you now. Do you have any questions that you would like to pose to Sharon? I'm going to try and see if I can get some questions, possibly from the sides. Does anybody have a question on this side? Do I see any hands up here? I see a hand over here. All right, great.
Just a little closer.
Just a little closer. Yeah.
And we talked about changing systems and processes, and that will kind of get you a more aesthetic change and not a deep-rooted change. I'm just paraphrasing. What if the people are ready to change, but the system and the process are not in alignment? How do we go about dealing with that?
That's a very good question. Processes, systems, and people. When there is adequate consultation, most often you will find that people will embrace change if they've had, number one, time to think it through, so the pace of change. If an organization decides that they want to do A, B, and C, rush it through and not consult, they're going to get a revolt. Also, looking at engaging individuals in the change process. So even if an organization wants to go a certain way and the people do not, being able to thrash out those difficulties or those differences and listening to individuals. Why do you think this change is important? and looking at the potential. How will this change enhance the community or the organization? How will that change enhance me? So for instance, there was a situation where when we looked at the P's of progression, the change was not explained what the benefit was. But when we went back and asked the question, how would I develop as an individual? What's the outcome for me? Although the pace was wrong and the consultation didn't happen, because there was seen benefits, people who were antagonistic to the change then came on board.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone from this side who has a quick question? A fire question? Anybody? Any hands over here for a question? Nobody needs to change. We're all okay where we are. Okay, well, our time is running out. We want to thank you so much, Sharon, for sharing that with us. Please give her a round of applause.
We'll ask Alistair to come on over for one more stretch.
Time for pain.
Look happy, everyone. Come on, let's stand up. This is our last one. I want to say you're the fittest leaders in Europe. So give yourself a round of applause. Let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4. EPC. Let's go. Okay, want to do this? 1. Good. 2. 3. 4. 5. 6. 7. 8.
Make it stop.
And 9. And 10. And this is our favorite one that we love the best. What are we going to do now? Okay. Tummies in and back straight. E-P-C. Let's go again. E-P-C. God bless you. Give yourself a round of applause. Thank you. God bless you guys.
Thank you very much, Alistair. Now, Sam, tell us who our final speaker is.
So, our final speaker is no stranger to me, Anna. I had the privilege of studying by her side through seminary at Newbold College. She has a passion and a fire for Jesus that is undoubtedly infectious. I have to say that in seminary, she was the one that kind of kept us in line. This woman rocks. She now serves as the principal for the Adventist Discovery Center in the UK and works tirelessly empowering others to fall in love with the Word of God. Today she comes to help us harness our change potential. Please welcome Maureen Rock.
Thank you. My role as pastor and administrator provides me with the opportunity to speak at different churches across the UK. Let me share with you, before I get into this talk, a few examples of the greetings that I receive on arrival at a church that I had not visited before. That space is for the visiting speaker. My response? I am the visiting speaker. No, I was not being presumptuous in pulling into the parking space. The pastor had already informed me in advance that when I arrive at the church, there is a space set for me. How about this greeting? Pastor Rock, thank you for visiting with us today. So my response naturally is, it's good to be here. And that encourages me and gets me ready to do what the Lord has sent me to do. And how about this one? No one said it would be a woman. Well, this was said by a woman. After greeting my husband standing beside me with a warm smile and a friendly handshake and a loud, "Welcome, Pastor Rock," to which he gave his most favorite response: "She is the pastor." At which point, the dear sister made a hasty exit out of the sanctuary, leaving my hand outstretched, hanging in the air. I could not respond to her. I did see her while I was preaching at the end of the church taking notes, so maybe I wasn't that bad after all. But this next greeting allowed me to acknowledge the change that God had made within me since entering into ministry. It helped me to acknowledge the growth that He has allowed me to experience, because this comment did not faze me at all. It was only recent. I do not accept women as pastors. This was said by a man who hunted me out during the lunch period and had to make his idea and his views known. So my response was just a smile, was, "Don't worry, you'll get over it." As a church member, I must now share with you that I'm now going to speak about the profession of pastor and not the gender. As a church member and a pastor, there are 3 questions that have always concerned me. I believe that when we are appointed as pastors and administrators, we are all expected to be change or agents of change. However, a number of us sometimes get it wrong. Let me explain. On appointment, our character and our reputation always reach the church before us. And that informs the church members about their expectation of the incoming pastor. Rest assured that before we take up our position, the members have already carried out their research on us. They know our likes and our dislikes, our successes and our failures, and all of this has happened before we even have led an elders board or business meeting. I also believe that many of our church members are quite contented in the situation that's going on in their churches. Okay, I accept. Argument at board meetings, lack of evangelistic approaches, late or lack of attendance at Sabbath school, no show at Wednesday night meetings, and even poor support for children's ministries. These are areas of the church situations that we as ministers need to address. I'm not saying we shouldn't do something, but there was a pastor there before us. So here comes my first question. What did you as my predecessor, or me as your predecessor, do while we were ministering in that church? These challenges were already in place before we arrived. Additionally, the members were content with the status quo until we, you, me, as new pastor, as the change agent, arrived. So on entry into the church, we must consciously acknowledge for ourselves that we have already initiated change. Our presence have already disturbed the balance. So here's my second question. How can we lead change when we are the change? The role of pastor, evangelist, Bible worker, administrator comes with the internal desire and the expectation from the organization for progress. And as a result, we are driven to demonstrate that we have made a difference. We are driven to show achievements. So on arrival, we call our elders and our members, and we share with them our new methods, our new practice, our new evangelistic ideas. And we do so much too soon. We introduce change in our churches before we have learned the cultures and the traditions of the church, before we learn the dynamics, the relationships, and why the members do the things they do. Let me share with you from my personal experience. I'm placing myself on the line here. I come from a business background, and it has been my life work to always set goals, to make a list. Short-term, medium, long-term goal. So when I was, after 12 years as a minister, after 12 years as an elder in a local church, what did I do? I enrolled at Newbold College, and in the gaps between lectures and assignments, I put together a list on my computer, which is called A Church I Am Blessed to Pastor. And I went through the church manual, every department. I knew what I wanted to do when I get there. There was a list of bullet points. I'm going to do this in the health department, in the youth department, in the children's department. It was clearly listed. And then I entered into the church as an intern, and my list had to be forgotten. Because I soon realized that that list was my list, not God's list. Example number 2. As a licensed pastor, wow, I've got my own churches to look after now. There were 2 churches I must take care of. So I sat down and I put together a list of all my preaching plan for the year was already worked out. Everything was documented. I'd amended the department list, having learned from the internship. But on my preaching plan, there were sermon topics for every event in the year: communion, stewardship, seasonal services. I even had a series of sermons I was going to be preaching myself. After all, I listened carefully to my lecturers. So I had the promise plan from the Bible listed in series. I also had the introduction of the first 6 books of Revelation, a series. I had a series of enhancing worship in the local church, a series of developing the development of the Seventh-day Adventist church. All of these were taught me by my lecturers at Newbold College, and I was ready to go into the church and do this work. I even had my elders preaching at least once a month, with me sitting in the congregation observing them, just as I was taught when I was an elder. And I entered into the church. I'm ready. I have my list. Lead me to the door. And when I got to the church, what did I find? 2 weeping churches, struggling to come to terms with a situation that I will always view as the worst spiritual pain a church congregation can ever experience. So once more, I had to put my list away and just minister to the people in front of me. Going to do change too soon can cause more pain. So of course, after a number of years within the local church, I receive a call from our union president informing me that the exec committee has asked for me to be the principal of the Adventist Discovery Center. Of course, having got through the panic and the fear of all those different emotions that's tied up, not to mention the fact that I would be the first female principal of a 70-year department, 70-year-old department that has never had a woman leading before. Having put that aside, I then did what you would expect. What did you think I did? I made a list. Some people just never learn. And having put my list together, I went through the past 4 years or 5 years that the department has put forward as session reports. This covered, or the past 4 or 5 session reports, which covered about 20 years. I pulled all of those together. I put a graph of the growth and the challenges of the department, and I was ready. And then, by prayer, I left my list at home. And I spent 2 months, precious months, sitting beside my predecessor as he trained me about what the department was all about. And not only that, a week before I took up my position, I arranged to meet with the team and meet with them and ask them to tell me, in their personal opinion, as open as they wish, what were the strengths, the weakness, the development, opportunities, and the threats of that department. I listened. I did not go in with my list. I went with their list. That is what I learned about change. So, having worked with the priorities of the department, having brought my team along, it is now a blessing to serve as a change agent. You see, I think these experiences that I've shared with you is not solo. Some of you have done exactly the same thing. See, the reason why these behaviors takes place is that we are driven. We are so driven by progress. We are expected to make those changes. Yes, we enter into the church, and who told us that we must immediately make changes in that church? Well, it is the system that we work within. But I keep reminding myself, someone had already made changes ahead of me. Someone had already introduced their form of change. And as it turned out, that someone shared the same class as I did at seminary. That someone graduated with me, or graduated before me, or graduated after me. We were all trained in the same pastoral ministry class. So why is it when we enter into a church, the first thing we do is change everything the predecessor had done? And that is because we want to put our stamp on that church to say, I pastored in that church. And by doing that, all we have done is created problems for the church. We want to say, this is the church I'm blessed to pastor. I am the pastor here now, and this is the way we're going. So my third question is, what about the members? What have I learned? I have learned my lessons, and I have applied them. And praise God, successes is being seen. The first lesson I learned about change. The church must take ownership of any change we as pastors have seen fit to bring to the church. If the church does not take ownership, if the members do not take ownership of that change, it will soon fall from the moment we leave that congregation. I know, I've seen it. Got my work going and so much excitement is happening, and from the moment we change pastors, it all falls to the floor. The second thing that I've learned about change during my years in ministry, we need to develop and involve our local leaders in the change process. It is assumed that if we sharpen our elders, they may take over the pulpit. It depends on how you do it. And I believe it's really important for local leaders to be developed. You see, we have been sent to seminary, we have been trained, we've graduated, we've come with our qualifications and our letters behind our name, and they have been in that church continually. They know the lay of the land. Why are we not involving them more in the change that we need to make? Why aren't we developing them? So I'm excited to hear that next year will be the year of the elders. I think it's so important to develop our local leaders. We need to recognize that we are not the only change agents within our churches, that we must the title pastor does not carry the authority automatically that the church will follow what we ask to do. Hence the frustration we feel within our churches. So on the contrary, if we don't bring these people along, whether they are elders or not, they will be the one who will destroy our change. And the third thing I've learned, find a community program that will touch the members' hearts. Even if it's a millennial, in particular a millennial community program, or something run by your disability group. If I had time, I would show you a video of a program, health program run in our church, brought in the bulk of our community people, and that was run by the deaf community within our church. Bring them along and involve them. There is nothing more empowering to our members when the new pastor walks in and embrace what the members are already doing and come alongside them. And get out on the road with them, go to the doors with them, and be part of what they're doing, saying, you're doing well, how can I help you improve that? And it is for these reasons I caution myself that I need to harness, hold back, control, be careful about my potential for change within the local church. You see, change introduced in a local church or even a department must be long-lasting, or else it is not change. The church's success is our success, but our success is not the church's success. I didn't say that. Someone's mentioned this to me, and I thought that's real. So it doesn't matter how much we report back to the union and to the conference, look at what we've done and look what we've achieved. And once a quarter, I have to report to every president in the British Union Conference what our department has been doing. But no matter what I present, if that change is not long-lasting, if it does not outlive me, I did not make a change. All I've done is given my team a lot of headache. So this is what I want to leave with you. If the change does not outlive us, then we have not succeeded. Change must be sustainable. Thank you for your time.
Maureen, why did you have to do that? My list has been destroyed. Thank you so much for really giving us something to think about. And now it's your turn. We're asking for you to respond. Turn to the person next to you or the people around you. What really challenged you in this talk? 2 minutes, off you go.
Thank you so much for your participation. Thank you. Now, let's see if there are any questions on this side for Maureen. What about in the middle? Any questions over here? Okay, perhaps on this side?
Maureen, I think you stumped us. We see a question over there in the far right.
Where? If you could
Good
please
throw, Anna.
stand. Oops, sorry.
What challenged me, Maureen, is that if I would have heard your presentation 3 years ago, my presentation would not have been held here. I really believe that all of us, trained at Newbolt in the last 20 years, heard that we need to, take stock of the fact that you need to take time and get to know the church before you implement changes. And I thought I had done that. So what do you recommend for those of us who want to make changes when it comes to signals to pick up on, to know when it is a go?
I want to try and make sure that I don't misinterpret your question, Giselle, but I can only place myself in that. I am a doer. It's what I do. I live, as I said, by goal setting. I want to see that I've achieved something. But if the church isn't ready to move, yes, it's frustrating, but we have to step back. That comes with our relationship that we build with our members. One of the things I believe is key to ministry is visitation. Getting into those homes and talking to the individuals. And I can only share that an answer to the question Giselle has just raised based on an experience that I've had with one of our members. When I got to the church, I found one nationality was leading the church while the other nationality was sitting back. And it was clear that we were undermining the potential we had within our church. So I visited one of the members who was, you see her and you knew that there was power in that woman, but yet still she sat in a corner. So how do we know that she's ready to do something? I turned up at her door and just had a general conversation with her, got to know her, and then asked her, so in your country, what did you do within the church? And that's when she informed me that she was responsible across the area for a particular department in her country. But when she came to us, the church was not ready to embrace that nationality or that culture, and she was left on the corner. So in conversation with the leaders, as I said about developing our leaders, in conversation with them, we said, why not give her a chance and see what happens? And that woman got up, having been asked personally to take charge and to deal with that program. She is now responsible for that very same work across the area in the UK. Was the church ready for her? No, they weren't. But I think as ministers, we need to know when to step in and say, let's give it a go and see what happens.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions in the audience? Yes, over there. If you could please come a little closer. I'm going to try this again.
Not bad.
Getting there.
Yeah, I just want to ask a simple question. Should change be applied when it cuts across doctrinal understanding and culture?
Greg, I will ask, whose culture?
Well, you know, different churches have different cultures.
Exactly.
You know, and they may have a particular way of understanding doctrine as well. And, you know, when a person comes in, they come with their own thinking, their own history and so forth, their own understanding. And it may conflict with the culture and their doctrinal understanding.
Certainly. I think the best way I can do this is, sorry, I'm going to have to play the gender card. I have to. It's the only way I can really explain that one. The culture within our church is usually seen that probably I myself could not really lead a church, could not lead a board, could not lead a certain program. But what a lot of people don't know is that I ran my own business before I became a pastor. So when I walk into a church, no one expects me to be able to stop, and I mean the word stop, these fightings we see on our church boards. There is a way we do that, and I use my business acumen to do that. Church board is an appointment with heaven. Church board meetings appointment with heaven, so there should not be any fights. So what happens with regards to changing that culture, I found for me, it was best to get myself into the Word, know the Bible. I shared with you what was on my preaching plan. No one expected a woman to take you through the teachings of Dr. Gunnar Peterson about the promised plan of God. No one expected a woman to be able to teach the first six books of the chapters of Revelation, taking us through the individual churches. No one expected me to be able to guide them into understanding the genealogies. And the problems I found with when we enter into a church, members want meat. They want us to know the Word. And when we stand and share the Word, as one member said to me, I questioned when you were coming, but the fact that you know God's Word has convinced me I can work with you. So that's what I use. I use the knowledge that the wonderful knowledge I've gained from studying at Newbold College with some fantastic lecturers who are still here. I use what they have taught me, and that is what goes ahead of me within the church. That way, everyone's blinded to my gender. You might say, well, surely that's who I am. I cannot change that, but I'm first and foremost a pastor. So we park that aside. Use the Word, and that will soon win the fight. Thank you.
Maureen, we just want to thank you so much. And just before you go, I just want to say, as a pastor myself, I want to take the time to affirm you and all the other women in ministry out there. God has called you to a mighty service, and His Holy Spirit is leading you. So thank you very much. Give her a round of applause.
Unfortunately, we have come to the end of EPC Talks 2018. We want to thank you for being with us, for your participation, and to give you a final reminder that if you want to connect with any of the speakers that have been here this week, please feel free to go to them and continue the conversation.
Anna, I have to do this.
What do you have to do?
Okay, so I need all of you to put your smiling faces on. This has to happen.
Selfie.
Okay? All right, everyone hands up and shout EPC. Ready? 3, 2, 1, shout EPC. I got my selfie, I'm happy. Well.
That's all from us. We hope that you have been challenged to connect,
to inspire,
and to change. God bless you all. Goodbye.